I can tell you the exact moment my world tilted, down to the way the hallway light flickered against my bedroom door and the soft tremble in my son's small voice. I was smoothing the duvet when Cade climbed onto the bed, knees drawn up, dinosaur pajamas wrinkled at the ankles. He looked like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if the words would hurt him more coming out. "Mama?" he whispered, barely audible. "Daddy talks to another lady, and he said they're gonna take all your money when you go on your trip." For a second, I didn't breathe. I froze in that strange half moment where you hope a child is repeating something from a cartoon or mixing up a dream, but I knew my son. At 7, Cade didn't invent stories. He observed, absorbed, and repeated the world exactly as he saw it. "Cade," I said slowly, "what do you mean?" He lowered his head, twisting his fingers together. "Last night I woke up. I heard Daddy in the den. He was talking on the phone. He said, when you leave, they'll have 3 days to get everything done." The lady laughed. "Daddy said they'd finally be able to breathe again. I don't know what that means, but, Mama, he sounded different." My stomach knotted so tightly I had to sit down. I wrapped my arms around him and he pressed his cheek into my chest like he used to when he was smaller. Within minutes, he fell asleep from emotional exhaustion, but I remained wide awake beside him, staring at the ceiling while dread pressed down on my ribs. By 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep. I went downstairs, turned on the kitchen's low pendant light, and made coffee I never touched. The house was silent, too silent for the thoughts racing inside me. I opened my laptop and scrolled through weeks of emails. Then I found something I'd brushed aside before. A series of scanned documents sent by my husband, Dorian, right after I'd come home from outpatient gallbladder surgery. He'd placed the papers on my lap when I was still groggy, insisting they were insurance updates, simple formality. I clicked the first attachment. Durable general power of attorney. Full authority granted. My breath left my body. I clicked another page. Authorization for asset management in event of medical or cognitive limitation. My signature sat weakly on the dotted line, clearly written by a woman still half lost in anesthesia. The date was right there, 2 days after my surgery. I remembered that afternoon with a clarity that made my skin prickle. I remembered the fog of pain medication, the way Dorian brought me herbal tea, the soft tone he used when he said, "It's just practical stuff, honey. I'll file it for us." And now I saw the trap I had walked into willingly, blindly, lovingly. I snapped the laptop shut so hard the echo felt like a slap. I stood and paced the kitchen, hands shaking. My home, a place I had built with stability, structure, and quiet pride, felt suddenly hostile, as if every shadow hid a secret I'd been too trusting to see. My husband wouldn't. He couldn't. Could he? I replayed every odd shift from the past few months. His late-night client calls, the change in his phone password, his sudden fascination with my travel schedule, the way he'd insisted I take this Nashville trip, the strange new cologne that wasn't his. All the pieces I had dismissed because I didn't want to believe what they whispered. At dawn, Dorian came downstairs, humming, freshly showered, acting like a man who hadn't just detonated the ground under my feet. He kissed my cheek like always. I flinched, barely, but enough that I felt the divide inside me widen. "Did you pack everything?" he asked, stirring the coffee I'd made but never drank. "Yes," I murmured, studying every expression on his face as if it belonged to a stranger. "What time's your flight?" 6:05, early. "And you're back Friday or Thursday?" he asked too casually, like someone trying not to sound eager for something. "Friday," I answered. He smiled. Small, satisfied, telling. Perfect. That tiny word confirmed every suspicion lodged in my chest. Around lunchtime, while he was out running errands, I called the only person I trusted with my life outside my own child, Maris Felden, an old friend from my university days who now practiced family law in Charlotte. I asked if she could meet me that evening. Urgent. Confidential. My voice must have betrayed something, but she didn't ask questions. She simply said, "Come at 7." The hours crawled. When I arrived at her office, she didn't waste time. "Did you bring the documents?" she asked. I handed her the printed pages, copies I'd rushed to make that afternoon while Dorian was still gone. Maris read in silence, her usually calm expression sharpening into something grim. "Nadia," she said finally, "this is bad. Really bad. You gave him sweeping control. He can move assets, open accounts, close accounts, sell property, make medical decisions. If he claims you're mentally unfit, he can take over everything." I felt the room tilt. "Without me here?" "Yes," she said softly. "That trip you're supposed to take, it's the perfect window." I pressed my hands to my temples. "What do I do?" "We revoke everything immediately, and we notify your bank." Quietly. Maris hesitated. "Do you have proof of his intentions?" "No," I whispered. "Only Kate's account." She sighed. "Then we must act before he does." When I drove home that night, I found Dorian in the living room with a glass of red wine. He smiled like nothing was wrong. "You're tense. Nervous about the trip?" I forced a smile. "Something like that." Inside, I was already planning, already preparing, already shifting from frightened wife to something sharper. Because fear wasn't going to save me. Strategy would. What I didn't know that night was that the first real proof of Dorian's betrayal was already waiting for me in the mailbox, sealed with a name I had never seen, but would soon learn to fear. The next morning began with a heaviness I couldn't shake. I woke before sunrise, my heart pounding as if it had been running laps while I slept. I moved through the house quietly, checking on Cade before heading downstairs. I needed space to think, to breathe. But that was impossible when every corner of my home felt like a crime scene waiting to be exposed. When I opened the front door to grab the newspaper, a stack of envelopes slid forward from the mailbox. Most were the usual mix of bills and advertisements, but one envelope, plain white, heavy, with a law firm seal stamped in the corner, nearly slipped from my fingers. The sender was someone I didn't recognize. Law offices of Emery Halden. My pulse accelerated. Why would a lawyer send something to me? I closed the door quietly, as if the walls themselves were listening, and carried the envelope to the kitchen table. The paper felt colder than it should have. For a moment, I stared at it, trying to steady my breathing. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want confirmation that everything Cade told me wasn't just a misinterpretation or childish fear. But silence was more dangerous than truth. So I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the document inside. What I saw knocked the breath from my lungs. It was a notarized validation, official, stamped, legal, confirming the activation of the power of attorney I had signed after my surgery. The document was dated weeks earlier. Worse, at the bottom were two signatures I didn't recognize. I leaned closer. Witness, Dorian Rowan. Witness, Rhea Caldwell. Rhea. That was the name. The woman. The ghost who had been lurking behind phone calls and late-night whispers. I didn't know her, but seeing her name paired with my husband's on a legal document made my legs give out. I sank into the chair, gripping the edge of the table. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't a misinterpretation or childish fear. This was a plan. A coordinated, legally structured, premeditated plan to take control of my entire life. I folded the document slowly, deliberately. My hands felt numb. I hadn't cried. Shock was more powerful than tears. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Maris. "I've contacted a specialist. He can help us strengthen the revocation and secure your assets. Come in today." I typed out a reply with trembling fingers. "I'll be there." When Dorian came downstairs around 8, I had already composed myself. I'd placed the envelope back in my work bag, hidden beneath spreadsheets and client notes. He smiled when he saw me dressed earlier than usual. "Big day?" he asked. "Pre-trip meetings. Lots to get in order." He leaned in to kiss me. I let him, even though it took everything in me to not recoil. I needed him unsuspecting, I needed him predictable. I needed him to believe he was still winning. "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" he asked again. 4:30, I reminded him, to catch the 6:05. "Oh, I don't mind," he said, but something in his tone cracked, thin as ice. When he left for work, I locked the door behind him, exhaled shakily, and pressed my forehead to the cool wood. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself. "You're not losing anything today. He is." I arrived at Maris's office at 11. She greeted me with a quick hug and ushered me into a conference room where a tall, silver-haired attorney stood waiting. His blazer was immaculate, and his expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Nadia," she said, "this is Emery Halden. He's handled cases involving domestic financial fraud for over 20 years. I shook his hand, trying to mask the tremor in mine. He gestured for me to sit. "I've reviewed the notes Mira sent last night. She also forwarded the scans of your documents." I took the notarized paper from my bag and slid it toward him. He didn't react outwardly, but his jaw tightened. "They've already filed the notarization, which means they intended to act on it soon." My throat tightened. How soon? Given the context, as soon as you were out of state. I stared at him. "So, Cade, he was right?" Halden nodded. "Children don't fabricate patterns this specific." My eyes burned, but I refused to blink the tears out. Halden began outlining a plan on his tablet. "First, we revoke this power of attorney immediately. It takes effect today. Second, we sever your husband's access to all accounts. Third, we secure your property title. Fourth," he looked at me with piercing seriousness, "we gather proof. Real, undeniable proof of his intent. Do you have any recordings, messages, anything that directly ties him to this?" "No," I whispered, "just Cade's words." "Then you need to create some." His tone wasn't cruel, it was purposeful. "You'll need to pretend you know nothing. Let them act. Let them expose themselves." My pulse pounded. "You're asking me to bait my husband." "I'm asking you to protect yourself and your son." There it was. The truth said out loud. I straightened. "Tell me what to do." For the next several hours, I signed revocation documents, updated account authorizations, moved funds to secure accounts in my name only, and confirmed legal protections I didn't know existed until today. By the time we finished, my signature felt shaky, but my resolve didn't. Halden handed me a folder. "As of this moment, Dorian has no legal authority over you. He won't know that until he tries to act. And when he does," he tapped the folder, "we'll be ready." Driving home, I felt a strange mix of strength and terror. I wasn't out of danger. I had simply stepped onto the battlefield before they realized I was armed. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat for a moment gripping the steering wheel, listening to my heartbeat thrum through my fingers. I thought about Cade, his small voice, his quiet bravery. I whispered, "I won't let them touch you, I promise." Dorian was waiting in the living room when I walked in, wine in hand, smile in place. "You're home early?" he said. "Meetings wrapped fast," I lied. He leaned in to kiss me. I let him, even though it took everything in me to not recoil. I needed him unsuspecting. I needed him predictable. I needed him to believe he was still winning. "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" he asked again. 4:30, I reminded him, to catch the 6:05. His eyes were brighter than they should have been at the mention of that time. "Right. I can drive you if you want." "No," I said gently. "I'll order a car. You don't have to wake up so early." "Oh, I don't mind," he said, but something in his tone cracked, thin as ice. When he left for work, I locked the door behind him, exhaled shakily, and pressed my forehead to the cool wood. "Stay calm," I said to myself. "You're not losing anything today. He is." That night, while pretending nothing was wrong, I stumbled upon something hidden among Dorian's documents. Something that confirmed my worst fear. I wasn't the only thing he planned to take.
That night, I moved through my home like a woman walking across thin ice. One wrong step, and everything beneath me would shatter. Dorian poured us each a glass of wine, talked about weekend plans, asked about my meetings. He played the role of a loving husband with such practiced smoothness that for a few moments I wondered how long he'd been rehearsing. I nodded and smiled, responding just enough to keep him unaware. But inside, my mind was a locked vault of thoughts he would never access again. When he finally went upstairs to shower, I exhaled the breath I'd been holding and headed to his office. It wasn't snooping anymore. Snooping was curiosity. This was survival. His office smelled like cedar and faint cologne. I opened the top drawer of his desk. Receipts, headphones, spare keys. Nothing. The second drawer. Printer paper, staplers, business cards. Still nothing. Then I pulled open the bottom drawer. Folders. Neatly labeled. Too neat. One caught my eye immediately. Caldwell. Asset planning. Ria's last name. My stomach tightened. I lifted the folder carefully and slipped the documents out. Inside were printed emails, schedule reminders, and one particular card. White, with a gold embossed logo. Northgate Behavioral and Wellness Institute. Wednesday, March 10th, 9 a.m. Consultation, Dr. K. Grant. My fingers went numb. This wasn't a coincidence. This was an appointment. For someone. And the date, the 10th, was the second morning of my supposed trip to Nashville. My room swayed. I skimmed the fine print at the bottom of the card. Preliminary assessment for capacity evaluation. Capacity evaluation. That was code for mental competency. They were planning to have me declared unstable. I gripped the desk to steady myself. I felt my entire world tilt from fear into something deeper, something sharp, cold, and empowering. Fear is what they expected. Panic, confusion, helplessness, but I didn't feel helpless. I felt awake. Every puzzle piece formed the same picture. They wanted my assets. They wanted control. They wanted me out of the way. And now they wanted Cade. I clutched the appointment card so tightly it bent. The idea of losing my son wasn't a fear. It was an impossibility, a line I would not let them cross. As I slipped the folder back exactly where it had been, I heard Dorian's footsteps upstairs. I moved quickly, but quietly, picked up my wine glass and leaned against the counter in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone as he came down. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, smiling faintly. "Just emails." He kissed my temple. I didn't move. If he noticed the stiffness in my shoulders, he didn't show it. But I felt his eyes lingering on me longer than usual. Later, after he'd fallen asleep, I stood in the doorway of Cade's room. The soft nightlight glowed against his small face. He slept curled around his stuffed lion, a gift from my mother that he still clung to when he was scared. I walked in quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. I stroked his hair, and for the first time in days, tears finally broke free. Silent, hot, and unstoppable. How close I had come to boarding that plane. How easily they could have taken everything. And how my son, my sweet, observant little boy, had been the only alarm loud enough to pull me back. I whispered, "I won't let anything happen to you, Cade. Not ever." He stirred, half asleep, and mumbled, "Mama?" "I'm right here," I said softly. "Go back to sleep." He settled instantly, trusting me in a way that felt holy and unbearably heavy. The next morning, as I buttered Cade's toast, he spoke up hesitantly. "Mama, Daddy told me something yesterday, but I didn't know if I should tell you." My heart thudded. "You can always tell me anything." He stared at his plate. He said, "When you go on your trip, I'm going to live with him and Miss Rhea for a while. He said they're getting me a puppy and that they have a new room for me." I nearly dropped the knife. My voice was even, though my chest felt like it was caving in. "He said that?" Cade nodded. "But I don't want a new room. I want my room, with you." I knelt beside him and cupped his cheeks. "Listen to me, Cade. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to take you away from me. Ever. Promise?" "I promise with my whole heart." He smiled, relieved enough to take his first bite of breakfast. I stood up and walked to the window, keeping my back to him so he wouldn't see the fury twisting my face. They weren't just planning to take my money. They were planning to take my child. That evening, I waited until Dorian stepped into the shower. Then, with shaking hands, I placed my phone, already recording, under the living room side table. I positioned it face down, tucked behind a vase. It captured sound perfectly. I pretended to fall asleep on the couch. At 11:07, I heard him walk in quietly. He didn't know the recorder was on. He dialed someone. "Hey, beautiful," he whispered. "She's asleep." Rhea's voice was unmistakable, breathy, smug. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, everything's ready. In 48 hours, it's all ours." A pause. "The attorney will approve the transfer?" "Yes. He thinks it's a family restructuring. She already signed the authorization after her surgery. She didn't even read it. Your brother got the down payment for the house. We just need to sign." Rhea laughed. "Perfect." Hearing them talk about my house, like furniture on Craigslist, made my entire body burn. The recording captured every poisonous word, every admission, every intention, every betrayal. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for safety or money. I was fighting to protect my life and the life of my child. The next morning, I took the recording straight to Haldon. What he uncovered about Rhea and her family made it clear this was not just betrayal. It was an organized attack.
I barely slept that night. Not because of fear. Fear had passed. What I felt now was something much colder, sharper, almost surgical. Betrayal has a way of burning the innocence out of you. Once the truth stares you down, you don't return to who you were before. At 8 in the morning, I dropped Cade off at school with an extra kiss on his forehead and the silent promise that nothing would touch him. Not on my watch. Then I drove straight to Haldon's office, the recording on my phone like a live grenade in my bag. He greeted me with a curt nod. "You brought it?" I handed him the phone. He played the audio through a secure speaker, expression unmoving, though the muscle in his jaw twitched. When the recording ended, he leaned back, folded his hands, and exhaled slowly. "This," he said, "is pure gold." "Gold?" I repeated bitterly. "Feels more like poison." "Poison," he agreed, "that they handed us willingly. This isn't just intent. This is active conspiracy, fraud, collusion, property theft, coercive planning." He tapped his desk. "And with Rhea's involvement, we may be dealing with something larger." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Haldon opened his laptop and pulled up a file. "I did some digging last night. You mentioned her last name, Caldwell. That rang a bell." He clicked, and a professional headshot appeared on the screen. Rhea, younger, polished, with a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. A chill prickled my spine. And she's doing this again? People like her don't change, Heldon said. They just get better at hiding it. There was more. He flipped to another document. A property record. This is the real estate company involved in your house transfer, Southern Crest Holdings. And? I asked. It's owned by Damien Caldwell. Her brother. My stomach dropped. He nodded. A family operation. Illegal on every level. So they've done this before? Very likely, Heldon said. This is coordinated, Nadia. Not a fling, not a spur-of-the-moment scheme. This is a full operation. It took a moment for the truth to settle. I hadn't married a man who wandered. I had married a man who partnered. Partnered with a woman who forged signatures, partnered with a family neck-deep in financial manipulation, partnered with someone willing to destroy me to replace me. And his target wasn't just my assets. It was my son. Heldon continued outlining the plan. Today, we file an emergency injunction to block any pending property transfer. The down payment they mentioned, we can freeze it with evidence of vitiated consent. Vitiated? I echoed. Meaning, consent obtained through deception. Deception. The word fit too perfectly. Then, Heldon continued, we'll present this recording to the district attorney. Quietly, for now. We don't want Dorian aware we know. I swallowed. He'll react badly. Yes, which is why you must proceed exactly as planned. Pretend you're still leaving for Nashville. And then? I asked. Then we watch him walk straight into the trap he set for you. That afternoon, after signing more documents than I cared to count, I picked up Kate up from school. He ran to me, backpack bouncing, smile bright. Mama, look, I got a sticker for finishing my reading chart. He held it up proudly. I laughed, not because of the sticker, but because somehow, despite everything, he still radiated innocence. Protection felt heavier than ever. We spent the evening doing homework at the dining table. The normalcy grounded me, sharpened me. But inside, every hour ticking closer to my trip made my pulse drum harder. Around 9, while Cade brushed his teeth, Dorian came into the kitchen wearing an uncharacteristically soft expression. Hey, we should talk, he said gently. I braced myself. About what? He stepped closer. Us. I feel like we're drifting, and I don't know, to reset things. Maybe after your trip, we should go somewhere, just the two of us. His voice trembled slightly. He was nervous. Good. He should be. Why so sudden? I asked cheerfully. It's not sudden, he insisted. I just miss us. I tilted my head, smiling just enough. Maybe after the summit. We can talk about it. He looked relieved, almost stupidly so. Great, I'll start looking at options. His phone buzzed on the counter, and I wasn't prepared for it. Rhea calling. The screen lit up clearly before he scrambled to snatch it. He glared at me, then forced a smile. Client, he lied. I didn't ask, I replied calmly. But his reaction told me everything. He excused himself to take the call upstairs. I remained where I was, breathing slowly through the fury gathering under my ribs. Cade returned in his pajamas and hugged my waist. Mama, why do you look angry? I knelt down. I'm not angry, love. I'm just thinking. He pressed his cheek to my shoulder. Daddy said something today. He said he's doing all this because he wants what's fair. I froze. He told you that? He nodded. I didn't understand. Fair to who? Fair. That was the word Dorian always used when he didn't want to say the truth. I whispered, to himself. Only himself. I tucked Cade into bed and sat beside him until he fell asleep. Then, with the house quiet, I activated the new security cameras Halden had arranged to be installed that afternoon while Dorian was gone. My phone buzzed shortly after with a message from Halden. Stay alert. Tomorrow, everything moves. I typed back, I'm ready. But if I was being honest, I wasn't ready. I was determined. There's a difference. Readiness means you expect what's coming. Determination means you'll face it even if you don't.
The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For a moment, lying there in the dark, I felt suspended between two worlds, the life I used to have and the battlefield I now stood on. I dressed quietly, jeans and a plain shirt, nothing that would draw attention. I moved like someone preparing for a heist, which, in a way, I was. Downstairs, I placed my empty suitcase back by the door, exactly where Dorian had seen it last. I needed him to believe I was leaving. I needed him off guard. I needed him thinking victory was already in motion. At 4:30 a.m., I turned on the car, slipped into the driver's seat, and backed out slowly, resisting the urge to look up at the bedroom window. Part of me wanted to see if Dorian was watching. But it didn't matter. Even if he was, he'd assume I was following the plan he arranged for me. I drove 4 blocks away to a small rental house Halden had secured. A safe staging point, he called it. It looked abandoned from the outside, but inside it was equipped with everything we needed. Computers, monitors linked to bank security feeds, audio equipment, coffee strong enough to peel paint from the walls. Halden was already there when I walked in. You good? He asked. No, I said honestly, but I'm here. That's good enough. We set up at the central table, the main screen showing the exterior cameras of Charlotte Metro First Bank, where Dorian planned to liquidate the accounts that, until yesterday, he thought he controlled. At 8:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Dorian. Did you board yet? Everything okay? His feigned concern made bile rise in my throat. I didn't answer. Halden glanced at the clock. He's checking your timeline. He expects you to land around 9. I know. At 8:47, another message came through. Dorian, let me know when you land. Want to be sure you're safe. Safe. From him. I silently turned my phone face down. At 9:10 a.m., Halden leaned forward. There he is. I followed his gaze to the screen. A camera positioned above the bank entrance saw Dorian walking through the revolving door, dressed in a gray suit, black folder under his arm. His stride was confident, almost smug. I felt the anger pulse under my skin. He thought he was winning. A moment later, a second camera captured Rhea sitting in a white SUV parked illegally at the curb, tapping anxiously on her phone. Her blonde hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail. She looked like someone preparing for a celebratory brunch, not the final step of a felony. She came, I muttered. Of course she did, Halden said. She thinks she's about to collect her reward. We watched as Dorian reached the teller window. Audio streamed from the bank's ambient microphones. Authorized, Halden assured me, for fraud monitoring cases. Good morning, the bank manager greeted him. I'm here to liquidate all funds from my wife's accounts. I'm her authorized agent. Here are the documents. His voice made my stomach twist. How many years had I trusted that tone? The manager took the folder, scanned the documents, then went still. One moment, please. We saw the exact instant Dorian's smile faltered. The manager returned moments later with his supervisor. Mr. Rowan, she said carefully, the power of attorney you presented was revoked less than 24 hours ago. Dorian blinked. That's impossible.
And, she continued, your authorization as co-signer has been removed. You no longer have access to these accounts. Dorian's mask dropped. I am her husband, he snapped. She signed this. Yes, the manager replied. And she legally rescinded it. She didn't tell me, he muttered. She was not required to. On the second camera, we saw Rhea step out of the SUV pacing in panic circles before rushing inside. She pushed her sunglasses on top of her head, eyes flashing. What's happening? She hissed. They're saying she canceled everything, but she didn't know. She couldn't have known. Someone tipped her off. Who? Who would she talk to? Who does she even trust? His silence was answer enough. Me. I watched as security approach them. The manager pressed a discreet button under the desk. Mr. Rowan, we're going to need you to leave unless you have additional authorized documents. This is ridiculous. My wife is out of state. She's helpless. I don't know what hit me harder, his anger or his certainty I was helpless. Oh, you sweet idiot, I whispered to the screen. Security escorted them outside. Rhea stormed ahead, pulling her hair tie loose, pacing angrily as she dialed someone. Dorian followed, face pale, jaw clenched so tight I could practically hear his teeth grinding through the screen. Heldon paused the footage. That, he said evenly, is the moment their plan collapses. I didn't exhale until he said it. My phone buzzed again. Dorian, answer me. Where are you? What did you do? Then another. Unknown number. Call your husband back. Urgent. I didn't need to check to know the second message was from Rhea. Haldon touched my arm gently. Do not answer. Every message he sends is evidence. Every panic-driven action is an admission. What will he do next? He'll go to the house. He'll try to confront you, but you're not there, and we're capturing everything. Sure enough, at 12:21 p.m., an alert pinged. The front door camera of my home activated. Dorian was on my porch, pounding on the door, shouting my name. Rhea appeared minutes later, a storm in heels. They argued, gesturing wildly, stress fracturing their composure. They look unhinged, I murmured. That helps us, Haldon replied. Hours later, after they left in a frenzy, Haldon shut down the monitor. Nadia, he said quietly, we file everything today. Fraud, attempted coercion, attempted property theft, abuse of legal authority. And Cade? I asked softly. He stays with you. Period. The relief didn't hit me gently. It slammed into me. My hands trembled, my throat tightened. The weight holding up my chest for days finally shifted. You beat them today, Haldon said. No, I breathed. Today they beat themselves. But the fight wasn't over. That evening, Dorian finally reached me through a number I didn't recognize, and for the first time I heard the desperation in his voice, followed by the confession that sealed his fate. By the time I returned home that evening, the sky had darkened into a soft indigo wash, the kind that usually calmed me. Not tonight. Tonight the air felt charged, like the pause before thunder cracks open the clouds. Cade was sitting on the living room rug, building a tower from wooden blocks. When he saw me, he ran into my arms, his small hands gripping my shoulders like he feared I would disappear again. I missed you, he whispered. I missed you more, I said, kissing the top of his head. Everything's okay now. I needed him to believe that, even if the storm was still gathering at our doorstep. Haldon stayed at my house for a while longer, organizing digital files, saving copies in a secured drive, preparing the documents we would file in the morning. When he finally left, I walked him to the door. If he calls, answer. Keep your tone neutral. Let him speak more than you do. You think he's going to confess something? He already has. In that recording. Today's meltdown at the bank only strengthens your case. But hearing him confront you directly will be invaluable in court. I nodded, gripping the doorknob. I can handle it. You already are. Once he drove away, I locked the door and checked the windows, more a habit of trauma than caution. Then I tucked Cade into bed, read him 2 stories even though he usually only wanted 1, and sat beside him until his breathing softened and evened into sleep. I was walking downstairs when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. My heart stuttered, but I answered. Hello? There was a moment of silence before I heard breathing, uneven, shaky. Nadia? Dorian. Except this wasn't the confident, composed voice he used at the bank, or the charming tone he used to manipulate. This voice was stripped raw, angry, desperate, unstable. Where are you? He demanded. That doesn't matter, I said calmly. Don't play games with me, he snapped. You blocked my number. Why? What did you do? I knew he expected fear in my voice. Instead, I gave him steady neutrality. I made a choice, a necessary one. You talked to someone. Who? Who put these lies into your head? I closed my eyes. Lies. The irony almost made me laugh. You did, Dorian, I said softly. What is that supposed to mean? You told Rhea you'd handle everything while I was out of state. You told her you only needed 3 days. You told her she'd finally be able to breathe. Silence exploded through the line, thick and heavy. You're spying on me? He finally muttered, his voice tight. I'm listening. That's different. You've changed. You're paranoid. You're acting unstable, Nadia. That was the trigger word. They planned to use it against me. I forced my voice to stay cool. No, what I am is aware. You're sick, he shot back. You need help. And you need a lawyer. There was a sharp inhale. I could picture him pacing, jaw clenched, hair disheveled from running his hand through it in frustration. This is insane. Why would you think I'd hurt you? Why would you believe I'd take your money? You weren't just planning to take my money, Dorian. You were planning to take my son. His silence said everything. Did you think I wouldn't find out? You told him he'd be living with you and Rhea while I was gone. You promised him a puppy and a room in a house I didn't even know existed. This is all a misunderstanding, he argued. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Then explain the appointment with the psychiatrist. March 10th, 9 a.m., capacity evaluation. The line went dead silent. Then, that wasn't supposed to be your concern, he whispered. I nearly dropped the phone. Not supposed to be my concern? The psychiatrist was going to evaluate me without my knowledge, while I was supposedly out of state, while you were here transferring my house into a company owned by Rhea's brother? Stop twisting everything. Everything I've said is the truth. I have the documents. I have the recording. And now I have your silence. His breathing turned ragged. You were never supposed to fight me on this. I was trying to build a future with Rhea, not with me. He exhaled shakily, voice dropping into something darker. You took everything from me, Nadia. For years, you made me feel small, invisible. You controlled the money, the decisions, the life. I was nothing. You could have talked to me, but you chose betrayal. You chose deception. You left me no choice. He argued, almost pleading. She made me feel seen. She made me feel like I mattered. She made you feel powerful, I corrected, because she wanted what you could steal. You don't understand, he urged. I understand perfectly. And you're right about one thing. What's that? You have no choices left. Another pause. This one felt like a crack in ice before it breaks. You're going to regret this, he whispered. You and that lawyer of yours. You don't know what Rhea is capable of. Neither do you. But you're about to find out. Before he could respond, Cade's voice drifted from the hallway, soft and trembling. "Mama? Are you talking to Daddy?" He stood at the bottom of the stairs, rubbing his eyes, confusion and fear swirling together in his expression. My heart cracked open. "Yes, baby," I said gently, "but I'm done now." Into the phone, I said, "Do not call this number again." "Nadia." I hung up, and for the first time in years, the silence that followed felt like safety, not dread. The next morning, Halden and I marched into the district attorney's office with every piece of evidence: recordings, documents, bank footage, and Dorian's own words. What happened in that office would set the stage for the courtroom battle that neither Dorian nor Rhea ever saw coming. By the time I returned home that evening, the sky had darkened into a soft indigo wash, the kind that usually calmed me. Not tonight. Tonight the air felt charged, like the pause before thunder cracks open the clouds. Cade was sitting on the living room rug, building a tower from wooden blocks. When he saw me, he ran into my arms, his small hands gripping my shoulders like he feared I would disappear again. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed you more," I said, kissing the top of his head. "Everything's okay now." I needed him to believe that, even if the storm was still gathering at our doorstep. Halden stayed at my house for a while longer, organizing digital files, saving copies in a secured drive, preparing the documents we would file in the morning. When he finally left, I walked him to the door. "If he calls, answer. Keep your tone neutral. Let him speak more than you do." "You think he's going to confess something?" "He already has. In that recording. Today's meltdown at the bank only strengthens your case. But hearing him confront you directly will be invaluable in court." I nodded, gripping the doorknob. "I can handle it." "You already are." Once he drove away, I locked the door and checked the windows, more a habit of trauma than caution. Then I tucked Cade into bed, read him 2 stories even though he usually only wanted 1, and sat beside him until his breathing softened and evened into sleep. I was walking downstairs when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. My heart stuttered, but I answered. "Hello?" There was a moment of silence before I heard breathing, uneven, shaky. "Nadia?" "Dorian." Except this wasn't the confident, composed voice he used at the bank, or the charming tone he used to manipulate. This voice was stripped raw, angry, desperate, unstable. "Where are you?" he demanded. "That doesn't matter," I said calmly. "Don't play games with me," he snapped. "You blocked my number. Why? What did you do?" I knew he expected fear in my voice. Instead, I gave him steady neutrality. "I made a choice, a necessary one." "You talked to someone. Who? Who put these lies into your head?" I closed my eyes. Lies. The irony almost made me laugh. "You did, Dorian," I said softly. "What is that supposed to mean?" "You told Rhea you'd handle everything while I was out of state. You told her you only needed 3 days. You told her she'd finally be able to breathe." Silence exploded through the line, thick and heavy. You're spying on me?" he finally muttered, his voice tight. "I'm listening. That's different." "You've changed. You're paranoid. You're acting unstable, Nadia." That was the trigger word. They planned to use it against me. I forced my voice to stay cool. "No, what I am is aware." "You're sick," he shot back. "You need help. And you need a lawyer." There was a sharp inhale. I could picture him pacing, jaw clenched, hair disheveled from running his hand through it in frustration. "This is insane. Why would you think I'd hurt you? Why would you believe I'd take your money?" "You weren't just planning to take my money, Dorian. You were planning to take my son." His silence said everything. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?
You told him he'd be living with you and Ria while I was gone. You promised him a puppy and a room in a house I didn't even know existed. This is all a misunderstanding, he argued. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Then explain the appointment with the psychiatrist. March 10th, 9 a.m., capacity evaluation. The line went dead silent. Then, that wasn't supposed to be your concern, he whispered. I nearly dropped the phone. Not supposed to be my concern? The psychiatrist was going to evaluate me without my knowledge, while I was supposedly out of state, while you were here transferring my house into a company owned by Ria's brother? Stop twisting everything. Everything I've said is the truth. I have the documents. I have the recording. And now I have your silence. His breathing turned ragged. You were never supposed to fight me on this. I was trying to build a future with Ria, not with me. He exhaled shakily, voice dropping into something darker. You took everything from me, Nadia. For years, you made me feel small, invisible. You controlled the money, the decisions, the life. I was nothing. You could have talked to me, but you chose betrayal. You chose deception. You left me no choice. He argued, almost pleading. She made me feel seen. She made me feel like I mattered. She made you feel powerful, I corrected, because she wanted what you could steal. You don't understand, he urged. I understand perfectly. And you're right about one thing. What's that? You have no choices left. Another pause. This one felt like a crack in ice before it breaks. You're going to regret this, he whispered. You and that lawyer of yours. You don't know what Ria is capable of. Neither do you. But you're about to find out. Before he could respond, Cade's voice drifted from the hallway, soft and trembling. Mama? Are you talking to Daddy? He stood at the bottom of the stairs, rubbing his eyes, confusion and fear swirling together in his expression. My heart cracked open. Yes, baby, I said gently, but I'm done now. Into the phone, I said, do not call this number again. Nadia. I hung up, and for the first time in years, the silence that followed felt like safety, not dread. The next morning, Halden and I marched into the district attorney's office with every piece of evidence, recordings, documents, bank footage, and Dorian's own words. What happened in that office would set the stage for the courtroom battle that neither Dorian nor Ria ever saw coming.
The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. Not peace exactly, but purpose. I got dressed in a navy blouse and black slacks, tied my hair back tightly, and checked on Cade, who was still asleep with his stuffed lion tucked under his arm. I kissed his forehead softly before heading downstairs. Halden arrived at my house at 7:40 a.m., punctual as always. He carried a leather briefcase that looked heavier than usual, filled with the documents, recordings, and legal filings that were about to become my armor. You ready? He asked, adjusting his glasses. No, I admitted, but I'm willing. That's enough. He offered me a small, approving nod. Let's go. The drive to the district attorney's office was quiet but charged. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I kept my face composed. I had to. Falling apart was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore, not when a 7-year-old depended on me to keep both our lives from being rewritten by the two people trying to erase us. When we walked into the building, the familiar institutional smell of paper and coffee hit me. The DA's office sat on the 4th floor. Glass doors, polished tile, serious expressions everywhere. The receptionist looked up. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? Halden and Rowan for the fraud unit, Halden said, his voice professional, clipped. We were told to come at 9. Of course, she said. They're expecting you. A few minutes later, we were ushered into a conference room where an assistant district attorney, a woman in her early 40s, named Caroline Voss, sat waiting with a legal pad. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. Not warm, not cold, professional. She greeted us with a firm handshake. "Mr. Halden, Miss Rowan, I've been briefed. You have evidence regarding an attempted domestic financial fraud?" "More than that," Halden replied. "Much more." We sat. My heartbeat hammered, but I forced myself to sit tall, hands clasped neatly in my lap. Halden began with the documents: the power of attorney signed under medical duress, the notarized endorsement with Ria's signature, the asset transfer filings. Caroline reviewed each page, her brow gradually rising, her posture stiffening. Then Halden played the recording. Dorian's voice filled the room. "Everything's ready. In 48 hours, it's all ours. She already signed the authorization after her surgery. Your brother got the down payment for the house. Then Ria. Perfect. I can't wait." I watched Caroline's eyes widen, then narrow. When the audio ended, she clicked her pen once, sharply. "That," she said, "is damning." "Agreed," Halden said. "And this was recorded legally?" she asked me. I nodded. "I placed the recorder in my home. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. I was that party." Caroline tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Tell me about the psychiatric appointment scheduled for March 10th. Halden slid the appointment card across the table. She read it, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Capacity evaluation," she said. "They were preparing a strategy to declare you unfit. Combined with the financial moves, this was a planned incapacitation." Her tone hardened. "That's not just fraud, that's coercive control." I swallowed. "They were going to take my son." Caroline looked at me then, really looked at me. "Do you have evidence that supports that claim?" I nodded. "My son told me. Twice. And the school counselor documented his statements yesterday." Halden handed over the counselor's report, signed, time-stamped, professional. She skimmed it and let out a breath that was equal parts disbelief and anger. "This," she said, "is far beyond a domestic dispute. This is a coordinated attempt to strip you of your legal agency, financial independence, and parental rights." "Yes," I whispered. "I know." Caroline put the papers down. "We will pursue this." The words hit me like a break in a storm cloud. "But," she added, "I need to ask you something directly, Miss Rowan." My spine straightened. "Anything. Do you believe your husband, or Miss Caldwell, poses a danger to you or your child?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Caroline nodded. "Then here's what we're going to do. First, an emergency protective order against both individuals. Second, a temporary restraining order with child protection provisions. Third, we officially open a criminal investigation." My breath caught. "Criminal?" "Absolutely," she said. "Attempted fraud, document falsification, conspiracy, abuse of legal authority, emotional endangerment of a minor." Hearing each charge felt like lifting bricks off my chest. "We'll also freeze any ongoing asset transfers," Caroline continued. "They won't be able to touch anything." Halden gave me a reassuring look. "You're safe, legally and physically." For the first time in weeks, I believed him. Caroline stood. "Now there's one more step. We need you to make a formal statement." I took a deep breath. "I can do that." She turned on a recorder, and I told her everything. Starting from the night Cade whispered the truth into the quiet of our bedroom, to the documents I found, to the call from Dorian, to the recording. I spoke clearly, slowly, factually. No tears, no shaking. When I finished, Caroline switched off the recorder and said, "Miss Rowan, you just handed us one of the strongest cases of domestic financial coercion I've seen in years." Something inside me finally cracked. not in a painful way, but in the way ice melts under sunlight. We walked out of the building an hour later. The hallways felt different now. Not intimidating, but supportive, as if justice had stepped into stride beside me. Outside, Halden turned to me. "You did very well." I exhaled shakily. "So what now?" "Now," he said, "we prepare for the hearing, and we let the law do its work." I nodded slowly. The air felt lighter. My shoulders felt freer. The fear that had been choking me had unraveled into determination. But I knew better to celebrate. Dorian wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly, and neither was Rhea. Later that week, we went to court. Dorian on one side of the room, Rhea beside him, both expecting to regain control. But the judge's reaction and what happened when the recordings were played changed everything.
Courtrooms have a strange energy, cold, echoing, heavy with things people don't want to say out loud. When Halden and I walked inside that morning, every step sounded louder than it should have. My palms were damp, but my face stayed composed. I'd spent days preparing myself not just legally, but emotionally. I wasn't walking into a fight. I was walking into a reckoning. Dorian was already seated at the respondents' table. He wore a navy suit, but it hung wrong on him. Wrinkled, desperate, rushed. He kept smoothing the lapels, a nervous tic I'd never seen before. His eyes darted toward me instantly, searching for some sign of fear. There was none. Rhea sat beside him, looking much less polished than she usually did. Her eyes were puffy, lips tight, hair scraped into a tight bun as if she no longer had time or nerves for perfection. When her gaze met mine, she offered a smirk, but it faltered quickly. Good. Let her feel it. Halden rested a reassuring hand on my arm before we sat. "Stay calm, we have everything we need." "I know." The judge entered, Judge Marlowe, stern, silver-haired, known for his intolerance for manipulation. We stood, then sat as he reviewed the docket. "This is the matter of Rowan versus Rowan. Temporary protective order, child protection provisions, and preliminary injunction for asset security." His eyes lifted. "I've reviewed the filings, and I will hear opening statements." Halden stood first. His voice was steady, clipped, professional, but layered with a certain quiet force that made every word land with weight. "Your Honor, this case is not a simple marital dispute. This is a coordinated attempt by Mr. Rowan and Ms. Caldwell to defraud Ms. Rowan, strip her of agency, transfer her property to a shell company owned by Ms. Caldwell's brother, and forcibly isolate her from her child. We have recordings, documents, and corroborating statements." Judge Marlowe nodded slowly. "I've reviewed the document packet. It is substantial." Dorian shifted, swallowing hard. Then his attorney, a man too slick, too eager, jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this entire thing is a misunderstanding. My client's wife has been under extreme stress following medical complications. Her memory is unreliable. We believe she may be acting from a place of confusion and emotional instability." There it was, the attack I knew was coming. Judge Marlowe's eyes snapped toward me. "Ms. Rowan, do you feel unstable or confused at this time?" I met his gaze. "No, Your Honor. I feel aware." Halden placed a single USB drive on the table. "Your Honor, the audio recording." That was the moment everything shifted. A court clerk set up the speaker, and the recording began. Dorian's voice filled the room. "Everything's ready. In 48 hours, it's all ours." Then Rhea, "Your brother got the down payment for the house." "Perfect. I can't wait." Every word echoed like a hammer strike. Dorian's face drained of color. Rhea stiffened, her jaw tightening until she looked like she might snap.
When the final line played, the courtroom was silent. Judge Marlowe leaned forward. "Mr. Rowan, is this your voice?" He hesitated. Too long. "Yes. And these statements reflect your intentions?" He floundered. "It was taken out of context." "There is no context in which conspiring to take your wife's property without her knowledge is appropriate." Rhea finally stood, her voice sharp. "Your Honor, that recording was edited." "Sit down," the judge ordered. And she did. Halden rose. "Your Honor, the bank footage corroborates the recording. The attempts to liquidate the accounts match the dates and content perfectly. There is also a scheduled psychiatric assessment arranged without Ms. Rowan's knowledge, intended to declare her incapacitated." Judge Marlowe's expression hardened. "I see." Dorian's attorney tried again. "Your Honor, Mr. Rowan was concerned for his wife's mental well-being. Judge Marlowe held up a hand. "Enough." He turned to me. "Ms. Rowan, please approach." I did, my legs steady despite the storm inside me. "Your son, is he safe with you?" "Yes, Your Honor. I've made sure of it." "And do you believe he is in danger from Mr. Rowan or Ms. Caldwell?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely." Dorian slammed his palm on the cable. "Nadia, stop this." I didn't even flinch. Judge Marlowe pointed toward him. "Mr. Rowan, you will remain silent unless spoken to." Dorian collapsed back into his chair. Rhea leaned toward him, whispering something sharp and frantic. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge signaled for me to return to my seat. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. "Temporary full custody is granted to Ms. Rowan. Effective immediately, Mr. Rowan is to have no contact, direct or indirect, with the child until further review." My heart clenched, a mix of relief and heartbreak. "And regarding Ms. Caldwell," the judge continued, turning his gaze toward her, "she is barred from any involvement with Ms. Rowan's property, accounts, or the child. Additionally, a no-contact order is issued." Rhea's mouth fell open. "Ma'am," the judge said sharply, "be thankful I'm not referring this to a criminal magistrate today. Your involvement is noted and will be addressed soon." Her face went red. Anger, humiliation, panic. A blend I had waited to see. Judge Marlowe wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he said, "all property transfer activities initiated in the past 90 days are hereby frozen. A forensic auditor will review each transaction." Dorian looked like a man watching his world collapse plank by plank. His attorney quietly gathered his papers, unable to salvage anything. The judge slammed his gavel once. Court adjourned. Silence. Then movement. Halden exhaled. Rhea stormed out. Dorian remained seated, staring at his hands like they no longer belonged to him. I walked past him. He looked up. "Nadia, please." For a moment, I studied the face of the man I'd once trusted with everything. Then I said, "You did this to yourself," and walked away. Outside the courtroom, sunlight spilled through the windows. Warm, bright, free. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine a future where fear wasn't the center of my life. But the final blow didn't come in court. It came days later, when Rhea was arrested, Dorian panicked, and the investigation uncovered a secret they had both kept buried for years, one that changed everything about their intentions. The days following the hearing were strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet, in that uneasy way the air feels after a tornado passes, when everything is technically still standing, but nothing is truly intact. I moved through my house carefully, as if the walls were still absorbing the echoes of the storm. Cade sensed a shift, though he didn't fully understand. He clung closer, slept with his nightlight again, asked every evening, "Mama, are we safe now?" "Yes, baby," I would say. "We're safe." And each day, that answer felt a little more true. Heldon called me every morning with updates. Most were routine, paperwork, filings, follow-up interviews with investigators. But on Thursday afternoon, his voice changed the moment I answered. "We have a development," he said. My stomach tightened. "What kind of development?" "One that will end this completely." I sat at the kitchen table. "Tell me." "It's about Rhea," he said, "and her brother." The auditor traced several suspicious transfers from the shell company, Southern Crest Holdings, the same company they planned to move your house into. I closed my eyes. What did they find? A trail, a long one. He explained that the company wasn't just a real estate business. It was part of a larger network. Fake loans, falsified investment accounts, manipulated tax filings. Fraud ran through it like a bloodstream. And Rhea wasn't just a participant. She was central. 2 hours later, there was a knock at my door. A neighbor texted me, "Police cars outside your house, everything okay?" But they weren't there for me. They were there for her. Charlotte police arrested Rhea at her townhouse. Handcuffs, cameras, the whole spectacle. Heldon told me she fought it at first, insisting it was all Dorian's idea, then insisting it was her brother's, then insisting she didn't know anything at all. But the evidence said otherwise. The fraudulent down payment, the forged signatures, her email correspondences, the transfer schedules, the psychiatric appointment she arranged. She had been planning this long before Dorian ever realized he was being used too. Karma, Heldon said, sounding satisfied. The clean kind. But the fallout didn't end there. Later that evening, my phone rang again. "It's Dorian," Heldon said, sounding grim. "He's spiraling." Apparently, once he learned Rhea had been arrested, he tried to call her repeatedly. When she didn't answer, he drove to her townhouse. Police were still there. They questioned him, realized he was involved, and sent him home while they sorted out the charges. He panicked. He texted me 20 times in an hour, called me from 4 different numbers, sent me a long message begging me to fix this because he never meant for any of it to go this far. Then came the final message. "We were supposed to be partners, Nadia. It wasn't supposed to turn out like this." Something in that message struck me. Not sadness, not pity. Clarity. Partners. He had never wanted a marriage. He had wanted an accomplice. And when I stopped being useful, he replaced me with someone he thought was more willing. But he miscalculated one thing. Rhea wasn't loyal to him either. She was loyal to the scheme. And when the scheme fell apart, she threw him under the bus so fast he barely hit the brakes. The next morning, I met with Heldon in his office. He slid a fresh file across the desk. "These are preliminary criminal charges," he said, "for both of them." My eyes scanned the list. Attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, forged authorization documents, attempted coercive control, attempted unlawful transfer of assets, child endangerment through coercive manipulation. My breath shook, but not from fear. "This is real," I whispered. "It's over," Heldon corrected. "You won." I swallowed a sudden knot of emotion. "Thank you." He shook his head. "You did this. You trusted yourself. Most people freeze in situations like this, but you fought for yourself and for your son." For the first time, I let myself believe it. That weekend, something remarkable happened. I took Cade to Freedom Park, our first outing in weeks that wasn't tied to lawyers, banks, or courtrooms. He wore his favorite superhero shirt, the one with the frayed sleeves he refused to let me throw away. He ran across the grass, laughing, chasing ducks with an energy I hadn't seen in months. And I sat on a bench, watching him, breathing free air like it was something sacred. Because it was. My phone buzzed once with a notification. Temporary custody extended to permanent primary custody pending final review. I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. Steady, quiet, right. When Kate came running back to me, breathless, he climbed onto the bench and wrapped his arms around me. "Are we really okay now, Mama?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "We're really okay." "And Daddy won't take me?" "No," I said gently. "He won't." "And that lady won't come back?" "No," I said. "Not ever." He nodded with a seriousness far too old for his small face. Then he hugged me tighter. "I knew you would protect us," he whispered. Something in my throat broke open. "Always," I said. "Always." Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt pieces of my life. Not the old life, but a new one. One that didn't include lies. One where my home felt safe again. One where I woke up and didn't question every quiet moment. I changed the locks, repainted the walls, reorganized rooms, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to reclaim the space completely. I was no longer living in a house someone else planned to steal. I was living in a home I fought to protect. Every morning, I watched the sunlight filter through the windows and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Freedom. Peace. Not the fragile kind, the earned kind. One evening, after putting Cade to bed, I walked through the house in the soft glow of the lamps. I paused by the dining table, the kitchen, the stairs, each room holding ghosts of conversations, fears, discoveries. I placed my hand on the banister and whispered to myself, "You survived." But that didn't feel complete. So I tried again. "You didn't just survive, you won." And I believed it. Because the truth is, the moment I listened to my son, everything changed. His tiny voice cracked open the whole truth and saved us both. Kate had been my first warning, and I had been our last line of defense. Together, we built our way back to safety, and together, we would build the rest. The story had ended, and in the quiet of my own thoughts, it felt as though a voice rose from somewhere deep inside me, soft, steady, and wiser than I ever knew I could be. If I ever choose to share everything I lived through, everything I lost, and everything I fought for, I think I would begin like this. Money never measures love. It measures greed. And sometimes it reveals the betrayal hiding in the person sleeping beside you. But it's also true that the purest, most unconditional love can come from a 7-year-old child who, with a single frightened whisper, saves your entire life. If you've stayed with me until the end of this journey, thank you. Did you like the story? And where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. If this story touched you and you'd like to help me keep sharing more life stories like this one, you can support me with a super thanks. Your warmth and kindness mean more than you know. Thank you so much for being here, for your support, and for all your sweet messages. I'm truly grateful for every one of you. On the screen, you'll find 2 more life stories I highly recommend, each filled with its own twists, lessons, and moments of truth. There's so much more waiting on my channel. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next life story.